Okay, so just to begin and go over our other example and other option for this assignment for multiple component but utility project with a hinge and importing hardware. So the other option is making some sort of a container, lidded container. Now it doesn't specifically have to be a like hinged rotating container, that sort. Um, Nor does it only have to have one lid. That one's all, you can go willy-nilly with that. But it does have to have, the two parts must be linked together with a hinge joint, or sorry, with a joint operation. That could be a rigid joint. You want to play around with the other ones, go nuts. But right now, this is the other option that, or this is the previous example model I have, and I left it in the open position here. So you can grab the lid, select it, and let me drag the thing. Come on. Why isn't it letting me do it now? There we are. And click and hold, and you're able to open and close it up to the limit, which I set to 180 degrees. And revert position. Now, one of the things I did on this is what we're going to go over. It doesn't just snap together. What happens here, and I'll just leave that as it is, if I zoom in, I've created a hinge itself on there. So this connects with two offset parts. So if you just looking at, like, if you look at opening a door, or, a door in your dorm, apartment, whatever, house, whatever, hinge, opening, anything, there's some sort of a hinge. It's not just connected. And this has a hole through the hinge. Let me hide the two parts. If I zoom in here, has a hole straight through that I imported a threaded rod from McMaster-Carr. So that threaded rod goes all the way through. And then I imported a couple of nuts on either end. And are these strictly necessary? No. Do they look neat? Yeah. But I made some modifications to this. Like I made this little thumb tab here. And I created the top and bottom through Extrude tools. And I added a taper onto that. That's why it has the taper. So I'm going to show you how to, model a box, or rather, basically it's two boxes, one on top of the other, but how to play around with some of the different features, like adding thumb tabs or things like that, but also how to go about modeling a hinge. So I'm going to revert that, let that snap back to the open position. And there we are. Hooray for fun stuff. So start a new project. And since we're going to get after this pretty quick, make sure to save it. So example, hinge lid box. Okay. Now I told you that it needs to have a specific dimension, or rather going to make it to intentionally contain something. Looking at my not really desk, we'll say it's a pen holder. Works for me. So like we started last class, when I was modeling the pair of pliers, I'm going to do the same thing in starting a sketch that will be my reference sketch. So with this, rather than making a sketch itself, I'm just going to make a quick model of a pen, which in this case will simply be a cylinder. So let's see here. This is roughly, alrighty, 150 millimeters long and roughly, we'll say 10 millimeters in diameter. So I can use, since our workspace right now, we are still working in the solids workspace, I can create a cylinder. And I want it to look like it's just laying over. So I'm going to actually use the XZ axis, like the flat wall working in front of me. To do that, then, I'm going to move over, and I won't put this right in the center. Just move it over somewhere else, making a cylinder. So basically what I'm doing is skipping a step. If I was to make this with circles and then extrude it, I'd get the same effect. So, yep, I want that to be 10 millimeters in diameter. And then in length, I want the length to be 150. Now, this is one of the options or a cylinder, I guess, just makes you go just one direction. That's fine. Okay. So that's just going to be my reference component or reference object. I want to have a pen. Now, because I do want it to be, I'm going to be building this in the center. I'm going to move this object to the middle here. So bring up my move tool, select body. Now that's going to give me some weird measurements or strange. I'm just going to drag this over. Now, I can just drag this, kind of eyeball it in place, anything like that, but I know it's 150 millimeters, so I can just move it. Sorry, brain fart on that. 75, negative 75 millimeters, because half of 150 is 75. Now that's more of in the middle. Okay, that gives me a reference point. That gives me a starting point. Now I can start a sketch, working flat down. Ooh, what's going on here? I've got my, there we are. I should have rotated that. That's okay. I'll do that. Let me go ahead and do that real quick. I like to, just because of my own preferences, I like to work horizontally, like wide in front. So I'm just going to rotate this cylinder, move, set pivot point right in the middle, uncheck, rotate that 90 degrees. What's the problem? That's odd. Why? Okay, sure. That's very strange. Great. Now I'm going to get all kinds of lost here. All right, that'll work. Yay, that was strange. Okay, starting the sketch, and I'm going to start with a center rectangle, right smack in the middle. So I know that it needs to be at least 150 millimeters wide. Pardon me, long rather. So let's give ourselves a little extra space. Let's say 200. That seems reasonable. And to at least hold several. Use the tab button, go over to the other dimension, and let's say 50. We'll make it 60 because I don't know why. Okay. So I'm going to convert this to a construction line. So I double click on the profile of the sketch, hit X. Now that is a construction line, and I want to finish the sketch. I just want that as my reference point. Okay. So now what I want to do, so that I don't trap myself by needing to like move sketches to other components or anything like that, I'm going to leave this, both this kind of reference of a pen, pencil, whatever you please, and my sketch, my construction line sketch under the main component, just under the main area here. Now I'm going to start a couple of other components. They're empty. That's fine. Standard component. Activate. Nope, I don't want to activate that when I'm done. We'll say that is the lid. And start another. That will be the bottom. Okay. That it just helps to get out in front of starting new components. If you have to start them later, it's not a problem whatsoever. But if you can remember to do it ahead of time, it does help so you don't accidentally get like nesting components and things like that, like a few of you run into. Not really a problem for what we're doing, but as models get more complex and you have more and more components, it can be problematic. Anyway, let's start with the bottom. So we'll activate that component. That ghosts these out, but because they're still visible, I can still interact with them, and that's fine. I want that for now. So I'm going to start a sketch on that plane, center rectangle, and since those sketch lines or those construction line sketches are still there, I can use those as references. Now I can just snap to that size. Cool. And I don't want to start another one right now, so hit escape to finish that part. Now, to make sure that I don't interact with that right now, I'm going to hide the sketches from the original, but I can leave the body there of that pencil reference. Now I'm just gonna edit this. So put some fillets because I want to round out the edges a bit. There we are. 15 is rather excessive. Let's say 2. 2 is not quite enough. 5? Sure, 5 works. Now, if I want to link these together, remember, mouse over the radius of that. It is referencing D5. Cool. If I right-click, I bring up my most used tools, and the top and going straight up is recently used tool. That's repeat fillet. Do the same. Enter in D5. That's going to link these together. Keep doing that for the others. D5 and nope, wrong one. Escape. That one. Great. Okay, now I'm going to use the extrude tool to build this to build this box out, but I would like to not have to build a whole nother inset to make the recess. So I'm going to use the offset. Select there, move that in a bit. I have found that 3 millimeters tends to be a good wall thickness if you plan on printing an object. So because this is going internal, -3, that works for me. Cool, simple thing there. Can I add features to it later? Absolutely. But for now, I'm going to finish the sketch. Now, let's make a recess. So I'm going to extrude, press E, brings up the extrude tool. Now, tonight, I do want to go over one of the new functions that has recently been added to Fusion, and that is the thin extrude. We'll go over that in a moment. But for now, I'm just going to do regular extrude. I want to select both profiles because I want the whole thing to go downward. So how thick was that? How thick were those pins? About 10 millimeters. We obviously want a little bit more material, so let's go downward. Let's say -20. That seems reasonable. This is where, if you wanted, this is where I added in the taper. So if you want, yeah, sure, give it a small light taper. -5, just boop, brings it in just a little bit. Okay. So that just created a flat spot there. Now, and of course, I did not want the sketches to hide, but it does it anyway, you jerk. All right, now I'm going to use the same extrude tool. Select there, and I want that to go down again. I'm going to match that -5 degree taper. Now, remember, you can drag this. You can drag your selection down manually, or what I like to do to maintain distance, I like to use, instead of when you have your selection here, start profile plane. We're going to go over this here in a bit. Direction, one-sided. Yep. Extent, instead of distance, I want to select to object. Now I'm going to orbit down, select the bottom of my box. Now that's going to automatically cut straight through. That's okay. The offset allows me to go basically back it up a bit. So I'm going to go say -3. There we are. Now the bottom, this recess again will always be -3 millimeters, or just 3 millimeters away from the bottom. So if I go and change the overall height of this, the original extrusion, that inner extrusion will follow. So, and it's already decided, or it's already assumed I want to cut. Yes, I do. Thank you. There we are. I'm going to do the operation. Now I have a recess here, internal. Cool. Now, one thing I wanted you to note, remember when I said that Fusion will function on anything it sees, so anything that's still visible? Let me reactivate all the components. It chopped my pencil stand-in half because at the time that was visible. So let me go back, edit this feature, and let's see if it'll let me do it this way. Hide that body. Now click OK. Nope, it's still going to operate on it because it saw it at the time. Oh, nope, there it is. So now, since I changed that up, since I went back and I went back and edited the extrusion and then hid the body, of that pen of the my pen stand in, my pencil stand in, and then finish the extrusion, now it did not chop it in half. So remember, if you have anything stand in or anything like that, hide it before you perform an operation if something intersects with that. That is one to always keep in mind. Okay. So that's going to be my basic bottom half. Are we going to add features to it? Definitely. But for now, just want to get this part built. Now, let's start the lid. Hide, or rather activate the lid component. The first ghosts out. Cool. All right. Now, I'm going to start a sketch, and now I'm going to be going upwards. So, same, that original work plane. Oops, that is not what I wanted. I accidentally selected the plane underneath. So let me just delete that. Well, luckily you don't have to delete it, actually. If you right-click on the tool, normally we've been going in Edit Sketch. This next option down is Redefine Sketch Plane. This means you don't have to go back and delete the whole thing just because you clicked the wrong spot. Click here. Plane. And, of course, it hides the origin. There we are. I want that. If you have difficulty selecting that because your selector keeps trying to grab the object underneath, hide that entirely. And you can't really see that I'm selecting this. Select there. Now we got it. That's what I want to work on. Cool. So now when I go and unhide the bottom, now I can go and edit the sketch. Now I'm working on the plane I wanted to, not down at the bottom of the tub. All right. But what I wanted to show you is how to use the project tool. And so far we have not used this. But what this will do is consider like if you have like, an overhead projector or you're watching a movie, it's like projected on a wall. Well, it's going to, the image gets distorted or whatever onto the wall. Similar issue or similar thing. It can be used a bunch of different ways. The project tool, press P on your keyboard, brings up project. What this will allow you to do is take profiles. Basically, if you were projecting an image like on an overhead projector or something of something that's already there, you can project that on a wall and you could trace that line. This is how to do this digitally, where it takes that object you were looking at and you can select like the edge profile and basically pull a copy of that edge profile. It's a really cool tool because what I want to do, rather than redrawing these sides or anything like that, so if I had a more complicated edge here for my drawing or for my my container here, I would have to redraw all that. With project, I can select, as it says here, entities. If I wanted just these edges, I could go around and select just the edges themselves. As you see, as I mouse over the edge line of the box, selecting those all individually, or if I mouse over that whole plane, that upper lip, I select that. It highlights that, just like if I were like going to extrude all of that. Click OK. Now, if I hide the bottom, I'm left with this purple line, but it's a copy of the original set of lines. Super convenient tool to use. And you find that easiest way is just press P, or you press S for your search tool, start typing in project. Okay. So from here, now I can make a copy of the lid, or I can make a similar lid. Finish the sketch. This line is all in the new component now too. So I didn't have to like copy and paste from the original from the bottom and put it into here. Okay, so let's press extrude, E. Let's see here. Profiles. Uh-oh. Hang on, my computer's freezing up on me. I probably should close a couple things I'm not using. Okay, computer caught back up. So now I'm making the lid. I did not have to redraw these profiles. I could just use a project tool. So I can click and drag, or I can enter the top numerically. Sure, 12. That seems reasonable. And let's see. I'll leave it straight. Click OK. All righty. So now it hid my sketch. So go back, unhide that projected sketch. There we are. Extrude again inside the profile. And again, because I don't feel like measuring, I can select object or the extent type to object. Now select the top and offset of -3, just so it's below. There we are. All right, now I have my recess in there. Now this is where I could go around and add fillets and things like that, and I'll do that in a minute. And we could do all kinds of other fun stuff here too. Let's see here. If I want to add a, well, let's play with this. Fillet, yep, the whole top. There we go. One, one's a nice little round over. Let's say 2 millimeter round over. Nice. Fillet, cool. So one of the things I was going to play with on this is you can create, remember you can draw on top of the lid here. So this is where if you wanted to, a sketch, actually do select the top, rotate that over. I could use like the text tool. Yep, on here. Sure, something, something. And pens or pen 15. Let's see here. Height. Yeah, let's make that a little bit larger. Come on. So you can play around with that. Finish sketch. This is where you could extrude, or you could again use the extrude tool. Select that. If you want it to be positive, come up, or let's say -1, not -15. That is definitely problematic. That cuts down in. Now you have a recess there. So very easy to start adding features and such to this. You can use some of the lines on here as rails. So one of the things I wanted to experiment with on this is I want to try to create a rounded ridge all the way around the lid here. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a sketch. Let's see here. I want the sketch actually, geez, that's confusing to try to look at. Let's hide the body there on that plane. Unhide. And what I want is I want to create a circle aligned onto that. Right there works. And let's try 2. 1 point, no, not 15, 1.5. That seems reasonable. Okay. I'm not sure if this will work. I've been wanting to experiment with this. It moved where I want. No, that's on the inside. Dang it. Go back and change that. Sorry, 1 second. Delete you. I wanted that up here. Sure. 2 is fine. Okay. So basically, this circle, this profile is just intersecting that edge line. But what I want to try is to create a sweep using that profile, but then the path, I want to use that line. So let's see if it'll let me select all of these. It should. Make sure chain selection is active. Hang on. Yep. So what I'm doing is I'm holding down Shift as I'm selecting. And for some reason, it's not letting me select all of them. Okay. Well, what that probably means is it's not letting me do all of them for whatever reason. There we go. That's strange. Oops, oops, oops. Ah. All right, I'll probably have to use a project to pull that line out. So I'll cancel that. I'll press project. Oh, nope, I have to have a sketch going first. Next sketch, right on top of there. And I want to press project because you have to have a project works only on during a sketch. So I'm going to double click that edge line, or nope, that's not going to let me do it. So I'll just go around and individually select all of these little edges here. Make sure I get all around and all that fun. Okay. There we are. Hit OK. Now there's a line there. Great. So what might be easier to do is just hide that body. Now I'm left with a series of sketches, but that is okay. So now I can go under Create, Sweep, select my profile, that circle, Path. Still not letting me do it. There we go. For some reason, it wasn't selecting the whole thing. Okie doke. And now when I unhide, so before, I want to show you something with the whole intuitive aspect of Fusion. When I created this this sweep, the operation automatically goes to, at the bottom of the toolbox of the sweep, automatically goes to new body. However, that's because currently the object that is intersecting with is hidden. If I unhide that body, which is my lid, now it automatically swaps to cut because it assumes I want to slice in. I, in fact, instead want to join. Hit OK. And there we go. Now it's very simple. It's very subtle, but I just wanted to add that little feature on top. So now there's a little rounded edge to the top of the lid. Not a big deal, just neato. Okay. So now I have my lid for pens. Let me collapse all of these, unhide the bottom, and go up top and activate all the things. Pardon me. All right, save. Okay. So the next up is making the hinge. Resume recording. Okay. So like I said, top's made, bottom's made. Now we have to make a hinge. Now, your thought might be first to go, all right, well, we'll make a joint because the other one, we kind of modeled that in to the pliers. If I hide the bolt and such, well, we had a natural point for the hinge, or sorry, for the joint because of the hole in the pliers. Well, looking at the previous example of the box, what I'm doing, pardon me, is what we need to do now. Let me close the box. Boop. Is now we need to make these little tabs, these little ears on either side. Now, the number of them really doesn't matter. This is the simplest one. I made one large one for the bottom and two smaller ones for the top. Basically, usually the minimum amount of sides for a hinge is 3, just so it balances out. For our box, we need to make the lid, or sorry, we need to make the hinge. So ideally what we're going to do is we're going to place a circle somewhere over here, and then we're going to need 2 ear lobes, basically, one for the top, one for the bottom. So a couple things about this. One, I'm going to draw the sketch, not on either side, but I went back up and reactivated on my hierarchy tree the entire project because I want to add this sketch to my main set of sketches. The same thing that I did, or at the same place, let me hide the top and bottom, as I set my original reference construction lines, because I'm going to need to share that sketch across across both the top and bottom. So that's why you want to make sure to draw something that's shared outside of either component. Is it still something you can use if you accidentally draw like a sketch in one component needed on the other? Absolutely. You can copy it, paste it, or like I showed you, you can use the project tool and bring that out. And we're going to use both of those. So first, I want to draw what is going to be just my general circle. So I'm going to start a sketch. And remember, if you have trouble, I want this sketch to be on the actual main plane. I don't want it to start on the edges or anything like that. So if you have trouble selecting the main plane, hide the things that are obscuring your selection, your origin plane, because I want this to be right there. Now I do want to go ahead and unhide them because I need that as a reference. Okay, so I'm going to start with a center point circle, and I want this to be somewhere outside of both the top and the bottom, but right on the main plane here. I'm going to start the center, and I used 6 millimeters for a hole before. We'll say 5 this time. It's a general use material. It's a general use size. Okay, cool. Now I need to add a thickness to this. Now, your first thought, yep, center circle, draw another. I want to use the offset tool because I want that to be reactive. What I mean by that is in the same way that in using the offset tool when I'm doing the extrude to cut into the lid or the base, if I make an adjustment to the overall depth, that extrusion is going to follow suit. Same thing here. I'm going to use the offset tool and offset this line here, or my circle here, so that if I go in and make a change to the center circle here, meaning like, you know what, actually, it doesn't need to be 5 millimeters. I can get away with 3. This offset will follow that. So a good wall thickness, like I said, is 3 millimeters. For this, 3 is probably overkill. Let's look at 2. 1.5? 1.5 seems reasonable. Okay. So now that offset is 1.5 millimeters larger in diameter than the original. Like I said, if I want to change that, I could go and double click on the original. I can change that to, like I said, 3. Now because I used the offset tool to make the second circle, it follows along. Very helpful. Okay. So the next thing I need to draw some lines. And in this case, I'm just going to draw straight lines, but I want them to interact with both the top and the bottom. That's how I made the lobes for here. And let me hide the bolt components and such. So I want a lobe to go to the top, and I want a lobe to go to the bottom. Well, to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the project tool to get a sketch line that I can actually interact with from the top and bottom here. So I'm still under the sketch operation. I'm going to press P on my keyboard. Now I want to select just the edges of this lid and base. You see how when I mouse over just the edge, it gives me a little line. Want that one and that one. We'll get a part of the curve just for grins. And the bottom. Okay. Click OK. We're good there. Because now when I hide the top and bottom, now I'm left with a line that I can work with. Now I can hide the top and bottom and just focus on this. Or if I needed to hide the top and bottom because I'm going to be doing some cutting or something, it won't slice into that. Cool. Now, just to move things around, I want to move this circle so it actually interacts with here. Now I can click and drag it, or I can use the, oops, not tangent, sorry, I want them to use a coincident. So I'm going to select my constraints here, select the circle, and select that line. It snaps that over. Using the coincident means, as you mouse over, constrains 2 points so that they snap together. So I could have drugged that over manually, but like I said, why do it manually when there's tools to make sure that they actually properly interact? Now I know perfectly well that if I zoom in, I'm not going to find like a weird hidden spot or something because I didn't actually move it all the way over. Super helpful. Okay. Hit escape to get away from that. And what I want to do now, I want to draw up my 2 little lobes. It doesn't have to be a straight line. I'm going to use line, and I'm going to go up. Well, I'm going to select the circle. And now ideally, yes, I want this line to be a tangent, but I can fix that with the constraint afterwards. So I'm just going to select somewhere about where I would like the line to start and draw upward. Now, again, as I mouse over the vertical line, my cursor is going to snap to that. I can select either a length if I want to input it manually or an angle. Just because I feel like it, I want that line to be at a 120-degree angle for no reason whatsoever. So what that means now is it lets me it locks that angle, but where do I want it to go up to? Wherever it meets. Great. So now I close that profile, and because I had this project line, now I have as you see that this profile here goes light blue, it tells me that is a complete closed profile. Now I'm going to select tangent. I want this line to be a tangent to that circle. There we go. Well, that 120 angle is definitely going to get me in trouble. So let's double click that. And I don't know, let's say 115. Oops, not that. Let's say 115. Let's see if I'm going to just completely scramble myself here. Nope, go the other way. 130. There we go. Just different ways you can play around with this. Okay, now let's do the bottom. Start another line, or if you feel like it, you can play around with different ways or different tools or different ways of making a line. So let's try a circle and a 3-point circle. Sure. Select tangent. I want to be locked onto there. It's not going to, you can't preset it before. Oops. Not repeat tangent. I wanted the circle. 3-point, that means that it will create a circle across 3 points. And you select somewhere on here, and now I can draw a circle between. And the only reason I'm doing this is just to play with making a curved surface underneath. However, like I said, I wanted to actually make that a tangent. Let me escape out of that. There's another option. 2-point tangent circle. So I want a circle that creates a tangent to there, and it's not going to let me do it on poop. All right, it's not going to let me do it on a curved surface. It has to be a flat surface. But wait, I can make one. That circle intersects right there. Won't let me do it on a flat surface or on a curved surface. Fine. I'll make my own. There. So I'm just playing around. There's really no rhyme or reason to that. I'll put a number in 4. Sure. Great. Okay. The only reason I'm doing that is so I can trim these elements out. So I'm going to delete this line here. Now, let's see here. Did it close up? Poop. It did not. Because my line wasn't quite to the spot. So, like I said before, when I was making the line, why I moved Why I moved this circle over to the line here using the coincident tool is so I can avoid, if I zoom way in here, you can see those will not connect, or they are not connected. Let me try doing the coincident of both of these. And won't let me. Okay, well, fine. Jerk. I'll just delete it and do what I should have done for the get-go. Somewhere on there. Somewhere on there. And we'll just make a circle that about fits. Cool. Okay. So now I'm going to go through and trim just chunks away. There we are. Yes, constraints were removed. That is fine. Hit escape to finish that tool. All right, so much the same way when we made the pliers that we made overlapping lines that we then trimmed away to make one side and then the other, doing the same thing here. This is essentially the exact same thing. I have what will become my center circle, and then I have the side that will become my lobe on the top and the side that will become my lobe on the bottom. I'm going to finish this sketch. Now I have that sketch floating in space. I'm going to unhide the bottom and top. Gets a little confusing visually, but you can see now how those share those sides. Now how those elements share sides on here. Okay. So now I want to create the lobes for the top and for the bottom. To do this, now I want to activate whichever one I want to work on. And again, the reason I made the sketches or the sketch on the main set of components, not on any individual one, is so I can access it from either side. So just so this is less confusing, I'm going to hide one side at a time. All right, so I'm going to work on the top here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press extrude. I'm going to select that center circle. I don't want to select the inner circle because I want to leave that hollow. And I'm going to select the top lobe. Oops, I skipped a step, my mistake. I meant to activate the lid component only. There we are, my mistake. Make sure you have the side that you are working on, that component activated, so that it all is on the same component. Okay, so I have this profile. Now I can drag it out one way and see now it's automatically joining because it's all in the same component on that, because I have the active component of the lid, well, active, but I'm pulling from a sketch that is on a shared sketch. I want this to go in opposite directions at the same time. So under direction, I'm going to select symmetric. Now, when I pull this outward, it grows equally in opposite directions. Let's say 20. I'm just picking something at random. 20 seems reasonable, probably very much overkill, but that's large enough. Okay, click join. That is now bonded to and part of the lid. Great. Unhide the bottom. Well, great, but that sketch, and of course it hides it automatically, that sketch is smack in the middle here. How do you make these lobes start way out here? This is where the other option on extrude comes in. Press extrude. Now I want to make sure, or actually you should have done this first, but make sure to activate the bottom. I am not hiding the top yet, but unless I can't access it properly. But now I'm going to select, if I reach in here, or if you're not being able to select it, yeah, temporarily hide the top and select your circle and the bottom lobe. But you have to have the other component visible for this. Because what I'm going to do, so far, we have only been working straight from an extrusion's existing plane, straight from the plane that the sketch already exists on. The first drop-down option on extrude in the toolbox says start. This is where it's starting from, hence start. You have other options. You have offset, which will allow you to start from an offset construction plane like we used for creating a loft. But the last option is object. If I select object, and since even though it's not active, the lid object is still visible, I mouse over this surface, click there. Now my extrusion of this profile, of the profile for the bottom lid, will start on this plane. As I extrude outward, it starts right there. Super cool. We'll say 15. That seems reasonable. Now, the only drawback is you cannot do both of these at the same time. So you have to do two separate operations. My operation, join, super good. Okay. Now it created that sketch, or it created that element, joined it already, but it started where the other piece ended. Orbit around, do the same thing on that side. Do another extrusion, see if it'll let me select in there. Yep, that side and that side. Start from object, select the other side, and drag it out. Or 15. Well, I want to make sure it's negative because we're going the opposite direction. Oops. Because I selected that, it automatically assumed I was working on the wrong, or on the other component. Double check that you don't, that it didn't automatically switch components on you. Because when you go to join, it was trying to add it to the top one. There we are. There we are. But remember, that's always reversible. Click OK. I said click OK. All righty. There we are. I hide the sketches so it's a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. There we go. So now I have a hinge joint from opposite sides there. Great. Well, I have the parts of a hinge joint. Now I need to actually attach the digital joint. All righty. Make sure to save. Select joint. Pardon me. Now this does get tricky because what I'm trying to do is select basically inside of this cylinder. Now, again, the new selection operations actually makes it pretty great. If I zoom in, I was trying to just estimate like at the center of that open tube. Well, great. But if I zoom in, you see that it automatically also generates some markers. There's a triangle in the center, which, as our constraints tell us, triangle means center between spaces. Then there's also a little point floating. It's the other end of that cylinder. Awesome. I want this in the center of the lid cylinder. Well, I kind of left the cursor about where it was, and I do mean about. Fusion assumes that you are still trying to find the center of that space, and the triangle appears in there. Remember that the top moves to, or the first selection moves to the second. But in this case, it's not moving, it's not snapping anywhere else. I'm going to be rotating. So select there. It hides the top, and my point is actually the exact same point. So sometimes that does cause problems if I'm trying to select there. Let's see here if it's going to let me do this. Let's try switching first the motion. I'm going to go to revolute, position. Yeah, it's still wanting to place there. All right. So the problem here is it's not wanting to let me select the exact same spot, even though they share the same spot. So I'm going to show you how to work around this problem. Realistic, what I probably could have done was just made the joint actually over here, and it wouldn't have made any difference. But we're going to solve the problem that we're faced with. So one of the other options on your selection tools under component 2 here, mode, simple mode. It allows you to just kind of simply join or select what's in front of you, reasonably simple things. The next option is between two faces. This is when you're trying to create basically a hinge point, a joint between objects that don't yet exist, or it's you want them to rotate around themselves in space. So I'm going to select that one. And what I can do, and let me hide the lid so it's a little bit easier to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to create a joint evenly between these planes here. So it says plane, select there. Which one I'm selecting first doesn't matter. And select there. And it's letting me create a joint in between here. The snap. See if it's going to let me do this. It's still not wanting to let me select right there. That is fairly infuriating. Yeah, because that is now rotating way off center. That is problematic. So let's try to reselect the snap here. No, still doing all kinds of weirdness. All right, fine. Be that way. Then we'll go back and do what I said before. All right. So what I'm going to do, because the lid and the bottom share faces, what I'm going to do, I'm going to hide the bottom, and I'm just going to create the joint here on the side. Okay. Now I'm going to unhide the bottom and hide the top. And because these are two separate faces, this is why it's letting me select it this way. Smack in the middle. Now I want to make sure I'm not letting it select that tube. So I'm going to mouse over this face. I don't know why it's trying to select that tube. So mouse over this face, press and hold control, just like we did for the bolts on the pliers. And it lets me snap there. Unhide the lid. And that let me select it that way this time. All right. Check my rotation around the Z-axis. Super good. Now I have a hinge joint built in place. We'll set the limits in a moment. Click OK. All right. Workarounds for any problem, hopefully. All right. So let's go and set this joint here. I want to set the minimum and maximum. You can do this numerically, or you can do this by hand. If you zoom in, you see the little flags. You've already kind of played around with this with making the bottles, the lofted bottles. So what I'm going to do is grab one of the flags and move this around. Now, I don't want that. I don't want the first one to move from there. So I'm actually going to grab the second one, rotate that. I don't know, 120 degrees. That's fine. But you can also do this numerically if you accidentally grab the wrong flag. Because the minimum, I want it to be 0, so it closes. And I can hit animate just to check. And there we go. The rest is so you can set like a pause in there. But there we are. Okay. Now, don't forget to ground the object that doesn't move. In this case, it's the bottom. So right-click on the hierarchy tree, and it's the second option from the top, ground. That locks it in place. So now when I grab like a face or something on the lid, it doesn't move both objects, just moves the one that you intend to move. All right, click save. There we are. And then from here, activate the whole component, already is. And we're going to insert from, pardon me, McMaster car, some parts. And in this case, yeah, I'll just use threaded rod because I'm going to do just like I did for the other metric. And that was 3. Yes, M3. Now, one quick thing, don't forget, you should probably measure the distance there. So, and inspect from that face to that face, and that is 70 millimeters. Cool. Okay. I forgot to do that first. So go back, McMaster car. It doesn't save your, unfortunately, it does not save your last position. So 3 millimeter, M3 millimeter rod, great. They have 75. Cool. That will work. Connecting rods. So remember how to get your parts in. So connecting rod, you go to the actual object. These are just different ones. If you look above it, it's just saying carbon steel. This is just the materials it's actually made from. Stainless steel's pretty. We'll use stainless. You select the SKU number there. Go to product detail. Now it will tell you, because this is where it'll show you like the actual layout of it, drawing. And you can go to your CAD selection. There's not one for Fusion specifically. We are using the one that says 3D SAT. Download, and it drops it immediately into your project. There we are. Okay, so now I do want to actually put this into position. So I'll drag this over, rotate this rod where it's roughly in position. That would be 90 degrees, genius. Pardon me. And capture position, sure, cool. Now you could pardon me, you could try to drag that into position manually, but again, why not let the program do it for you? I'm gonna use joint. Remember, the first thing is what you select, or the first selection is what moves. The second selection snaps it into place. So I want right smack in the middle. Again, the new selection options on Fusion really help out. I hover roughly in the center. Bam. It lets me select right in the middle. Awesome. Second selection, like we tried to do the first time around, I'm going to hover over where that internal tube is, and it's actually, let's orbit over just to make sure it's actually selecting that. Should be, yep, right in the center. Well, hang on. That looks like it's selecting. Yeah, that is not the center. Move over a little bit more. So if it's not quite finding it, hover over the next available option. I want it in the center of that hole, or that tube, but moving inwards. All right, hang on. I'm not finding it at all. Oops, I wanted it on the lid. Let's see here. It is not finding it, is it? There we are. So now when I mouse over this cylinder, the hollow, now you can see that all right, fine. So just like before, when you're trying to select the floating space in the center here and hold control, I'm going to mouse over the internal tube, just that internal space, press and hold control. Now it locks my selection inside that cylinder, or inside that empty cylinder, and it's allowing me to select there. Snaps over in place. I do not want that to rotate. I'm going to select a rigid joint. So this is where like rigid comes in handy. There we go. That is now appropriately located exactly where it needs to be. There we are. Unhide. And now I can go and bring in some, pardon me. Now I can go and bring in some nuts. So insert, McMaster car again. Come on. Oh, now you're going to stay where it was? No. All right. Nuts. And yeah, cap nuts are pretty. I want metric. I want M3. Pardon me. And now you can just select, it doesn't really matter for this case, but you're just selecting the actual material for these. So, yeah, sure, still stainless. Hooray. Go to the SKU number, product detail. It does save your last selection, so it should stay defaulted to the SAT number, or sorry, the SAT file type. Download. Okay. Same deal. Drag it. You do want this to be in the relative, at least, orientation, just like with the steel or with the rod. So let's move that 90 degrees. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Great. Capture position automatically. Click OK. All right. So now I'm going to do it again. But before I do this, I want to cap on either side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this component, and I'm just going to Control C, Control V. It dropped a second one in. Going to move that over because I want the second one automatically, but I want it to be oriented correctly. So move that 180 degrees. Great. Now we've got them already put in position. And because it was a copy of the same, these are going to be the same automatic component color. All right. Joint. Select here. Now, how do you make a selection for this part? Fair question. What I'm going to want is I want to actually locate the surface of this nut. So I'm going to mouse over the bottom there, click and hold Control, and now I can snap right there. Now, I don't want to have to deal with this threaded rod. It's going to be the same space, but it's not like it's actually threading on there. So I'm going to hide that threaded rod. But now I can mouse over the face of this hinge lobe, press and hold Control. Now I can snap to there. Pew, plop. Great. Motion. Yeah, it's a rigid joint. That's perfectly fine. Click OK. Do the same for the other side. Joint. Mouse over face, hold Control, grab the center there. It ghosts out. Mouse over the face here, click and hold Control, grab the center, plop. Snaps it in place. It is a rigid joint. We are good. Great. Okay. Unhide the threaded rod. And there we are. So that is how you can bring in the parts and snap them all in place. When I go to move the lid, you see that the nuts stay put. No, you can't see it because it's obscured. There we are. So those nuts stay put. The threaded rod is in there. There we are. So now, obviously, you would go about and put actually model like a pen or something. So I had that original little body in there. Let me hide the lid. So I could actually model a couple of pens and such, drop those in, and there we are. So that is my threaded lid. So one of the things I was going to try to show you all, and I want to show you a little example of the new option on Extrude. So what I'm going to do here, I press Extrude. The new option is Thin Extrude. Basically what this does is, and obviously you can mouse over it, it shows you, it extrudes a thinner wall. So select this, and I'm just show you an example of this, because what I want to try and do is create like a little internal lip so that it's not, those two halves are not just meeting flat, but there's a little bit of an interlock to them. So I'm going to select that upper profile, and I'll just drag up like 1 millimeter, and I'll show you what happens here. This lets you extrude a little channel inside. Really cool option. And that's exactly what it's for being able to do stuff like this. Now, I'll need to play around with this a bit to actually get it to work properly. But this is how you could create things like gaskets. So like if I wanted to actually put like a little ridge in this, that is how you could create a gasket. Or how you could make two interlocking lips, things like that. You can choose the wall location. Outside, that's not useful at all. Oops. Center. I would actually want that to join. So you can see how that works, or at least start to. We're running a little bit long, so I'm not going to go into the full detail of this, but this is a really cool option to play around with. We'll just cancel this for now, because it's going to take a little bit more modeling, and that's certainly not a necessary part. It's just more of one more thing that you can play around with. Yeah, so play around with some little flourishes. Definitely add little details. Make a container if that's what you want, or you can continue to work with your pliers until that is fully modeled. But make sure that you have your hardware. Oops, that's the original hardware I pulled in, and it is way too big. Make sure they are connected in place with joints. So all the more reason for, like when I was working on this one, to just use joints to automatically snap them in place rather than trying to manually put them in place and then add the joint for the hinge. But play around. So I will save these. These are available for you to play about with. experiment as you like. Good luck with your models. And please let me know where I can help.
I have a quick question.